Hello, everyone, and welcome to the budget breakdown with Dan Allman, who is the owner of Resolute U. Dan, we've just had everything's on the news about the budget, and Jim Chalmers actually calls this the most ambitious budget in decades. So, what we'd actually love from you is your take on it, your spin on what the budget says against our reality. So, what's your thoughts?
Morning, Becca Jane. Um, it's very, very good spin. And let's face it, politicians are really, really good at trying to spin their narrative. And you'll see that he will not get off that talking point for months, trying to tell you that it's the biggest reform we've had in decades. When I've looked at the budget and I've said, okay, how can I speak to people about what he's trying to get out there? I've gone down a little bit of a different path. Is yes, I'm going to explain what the budget is doing, but more importantly, what I want to do then is explain the budget against your lived reality. Because when I speak to my clients and we're chatting about cost of living pressures going up, it's always above. Well, they say inflation's this, but why do I walk out of a grocery store spending $150 that I can pack into two two paper bags? And then I go on my old man rant about how cranky I get when that happens. So what I wanted to be able to do for today is to explain, well, this is what they're saying, which is okay, it's what they're saying, but this is now what your lived reality is. And that's what we're going to discuss today.
Yeah, good one. And do you know what? I actually struggle because there's always going to be something in the world at the moment. Like, it feels like just yesterday that it was the war in Ukraine that caused all of this. And then it's the war in Iran, and then it's this and it's that. But how really does what's happening in the world affect the budget and where we are now?
Yeah, good question, Becca Jane. It impact, even though we're an island in the middle of nowhere, we're impacted by what happens in the world economy every single day. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, we saw a spike in oil because we knew Russia being a large oil producer, there was going to be sanctions come on, so oil prices rose. And along with the high demand and low supply that we had coming out of COVID, that started to help boost our inflation. And we all saw what happened in 23 and 24 with inflation and then the rate rises. So, yes, the war in Ukraine impacts, the war in Iran impacts, and there's nothing that we can do about that except say, well, okay, if that's what's happening, how do I survive it? And how do I move forward? And that's the biggest thing that we've got to look at is, well, I can't, whatever that orange Muppet does, I can't do anything about. All I can do is, well, okay, when I look at me and my family and us, well, how do I get through it? What
Mm.
tools and strategies do I need to actually get through to this? Because you can't worry about things you can't change.
So you're actually speaking my language, and I love that. So I hope that we do cover what is in our control and how we can and how we can deal with it, because I think that's when we talk so much about what's happening overseas or what's happening here and all the stuff, it's like it feels overwhelming. Specific, like, well, for me it does. So I love that you're going to bring it back into what you can control. So going back to our budget.
Yep.
Let's go. So let's talk to me about what they're giving us and what's actually the reality that most Australians will see.
Beautiful, Becca Jane. I'm going to share my screen so we can bring up the presentation because that's what everyone loves is a PowerPoint presentation. And they're telling you lies if they don't. Okay. So budget 2026-27. So that's looking forward to next financial year. What it gives you, what inflation takes away, and what the housing story actually means. Because ultimately this budget has been framed around we're going to solve the housing issue. We're going to make changes to capital gains tax. We're going to make changes to tax deductibility. And by making those changes, it's going to increase affordability for first home buyers. We actually went down this path in the Hawke Keating um,
Era.
era, thank you, and in the Hawke Keating era, and um, it didn't work.
Right.
Within 12 months, they had to unwind it, and they blamed the CGT tax that they brought in 1985. Guess who started high school? Um, and by 19, and then they implemented it in 86, 87, and 12 months later, they stopped it, right? That was the political spin. So what we're going to do today is get rid of that and give people the facts on what's happening, what's influencing, and by making any of these changes, will it actually do anything? So let's have a look. Budget relief. What the budget gives you. We're getting tax cuts, which is awesome. Starts 1 July. We're getting 1 July 27, we're getting more tax cuts. We're getting a initial $1,000 instant work deduction. So that means you don't need to claim, you don't need to have any receipts. You can just put on your tax return that I had $1,000 worth of work expenses. And if you're on the 30 cents in the dollar tax bracket, you'll get a $300 tax return. Okay? This is this is This is a good one because usually to get a tax deduction, you actually have to spend the money.
Yeah,
So
right.
they're just saying, well, you know what, you tell us you've done it and we'll just give you the tax deduction, right? So in an investment property, for example, if the rent you receive is lower than all of your outgoings, as of, for existing home investment property owners, you're able to offset that loss against your taxable income. But you've had to first spend that money before you get the tax deduction, right? So if your investment property costs you $10,000 to hold, you actually spend $10,000. That's money out of your pocket that you have to spend. And then you get a tax deduction at the end of the year. So if you're in the 30-cent tax bracket, you've spent $10,000 to get $3,000 return. And what we're hoping for is the capital growth in our properties will augment and offset the actual cash flow loss that we've had. This one, they're just going to say, put it on your tax return and we're going to give it to you. In 27, 28, the $250 WATO offset comes in. That's going to help. So for the average earner on the average taxpayer, what they're going to get is they're going to get 2 grand, 26, 27, and just under 3 grand of tax relief in 27, 28. Cost of relief and policies that they've done. This is important. Fuel tax, fuel excise cut. You can see there 52 cents down to 26 cents. That's going to expire in October, September, October. Well, if it's 3 months, then put it in, it'll expire at the end of this month, but they may kick it on. So what we're seeing is we had that big price shock in our fuel prices. The government said, oh shit, we've got to do something. We'll halve fuel excise. So we automatically saw a reduction in fuel prices, right? Once that relief runs out, our fuel prices increase by about 32 cents a litre, and that's coming. We're getting cheaper medicines, which is great. So all of our the vast majority of our medicines are subsidized by the government. And I think if you don't have a healthcare card, you pay about $30 a prescription, irrespective of what the actual medicines really cost. The government's putting in an infrastructure fund to help building. This isn't to build new houses. This infrastructure fund is to say, okay, we'll help with the sewage works, the roads, all of those costs that property developers have to spend, well, we're going to help subsidize that so we can make housing a little bit more affordable and we can bring housing on quicker. Negative gearing reforms, the new build. If you have an investment property now, sweet. And the only way you're going to get a tax deduction moving forward is if you buy brand new property. We're going to talk about that further in our presentation. Um, And what they're hoping over the next 10 years is that we'll have 75,000 more owner-occupiers come in by the changes they've made to the gearing and the CGT implications that they're bringing in.
Okay.
So that's that one. Right, let's have a look at the next one. This is our lived reality, people. This slide here is our absolute this bloody bar down here, Becca's doing my head in, is the absolute impact of what we've lived. Okay? Our headline CPI is now 4.6%. Your housing costs have risen 6.5%. Electricity has risen 25%.
Mm.
Remember when he said he was going to reduce your electricity bill by $250? How's that working out for us? Fuel. We understand why fuel's gone up. Okay, we had that price shock from when Iran was invaded, and we're still seeing that flow through now. Wages have actually only gone up 3.3%. So when you take off your what wages went up to what inflation is, we're actually going backwards 1.3%. And what that means is what $100 was worth at the end of 2025, it's only worth $98.70. So you're losing purchasing parity. When you sit down and you have a look at the next category, I broke it down to so for households or for people who earn 75 grand and for people who earn 120 grand. You have tax credits that are coming in of 1,800 to $2,000 for the 75 people and just over 3,300 for the 120,000. But our actual costs of what that is significantly more than what we're going to get back. So you're going to feel richer but be poorer. And I know that sounds stupid, but you're going to feel richer because the government's going to give you a little bit more money. But inflation's taking that away, so you're actually poorer. So this budget's actually not making is helping a little bit, but the way that the government helps is by reducing their spending
Mm.
to stop inflation because it's rising. These are real numbers from the ABS. This is what the Reserve Bank looked at in the early this month and went, we're raising interest rates. Reckon they're going to do that again in June. So if we're looking at for people to go, okay, but I'm living this reality, what can I do? Make sure your capital allocation is really strong. We're moving into a period of where we're going to go into a whole heap of this is what I need, but this is what I want. And you're going to have this friction in your budget and your capital allocation. And for us to get through this, what has to happen is my needs need to come first. And I may have to defer my wants into the future because it's putting too much stress on my budget. So having a really strong capital structure in place is going to help with what we're living with now. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It makes perfect sense. And for those of you that aren't aware of your capital allocation or your budget, we've got some free things like that on the website. So under our free resources. So I'll put that link um, just below in the video description.
Awesome. Awesome. We're going to move on.
Yes, please.
Okay. Oh, went backwards. This is the graph that shows you that shows you everything. Okay. This is a $75,000 wage earner. What goes in and what goes out? We're getting tax relief of $1,800. But the bottom line is what the cause of inflation is. That's why you feel poorer. That's why you sit back and you go, why isn't my money going as far as it was? Because this is our lived cost. Housing, electricity, fuel, food and groceries, insurance, other services. So your net result is you're going backwards $4,400. And that's your lived reality.
Mm.
Because everyone says, I just feel poor. This is what it is. This is how inflation, this is how inflation makes people poor,
Yeah.
right? This is what the Reserve Bank is saying. We have to stop spending. They're trying to be apolitical and they need to be, right? But they also need to call governments out on what they're doing that's causing things to happen. And the Reserve Bank governor has said we need to be fiscally responsible. That's government spending. Otherwise, we have to use monetary policy, which is interest rates, and they call that a blunt tool. That's hitting a walnut with a sledgehammer. And all they'll do is keep raising interest rates until inflation comes down. And what's going to happen? Your housing, your rent, and your mortgage costs are going to go up. So while you might see inflation come down a little bit because people have less money to spend, their mortgage and rent costs are going to increase because the landlords have to pay more on their investment loans, and then the renters are going to have to pay more rent to help subsidize that, to help pay for that. And that's just how property works. So, you know, again, good spin, but this is our lived reality, and this is what people are struggling with every day.
And the 125, how are they going?
They're going to get more. I don't know if I have that. No.
Okay.
Well, here you go. I've got a table. Budget cuts first estimated annual inflation. So we've gone and based it on where we are now and where the Reserve Bank thinks inflation is going to be. So let's have a look. Tax cuts received for 75,000 wage earners, 1800s. A low estimate of inflation is 4.5 grand, and a high estimate is 7 and 8,000. Right? So for single income families or for single people who are trying to get ahead,
Mm.
well, if we take the low estimate, what we're expecting at next year, just taking the low estimate of inflation, is you're going to go backwards about $3,700. So you can see as costs get higher, as your wage gets higher, you get a little bit more income from the government, but your costs are going to go up.
Mm.
Doesn't paint a really good picture, does it?
No,
When,
but it seems like the 250 plus are the ones that, I guess rightly so, are the ones that are getting the biggest kick in the pants.
yeah, yeah. And you know, $250,000 10 years ago was a huge wage. And for people who are on low incomes, I get it. I when I first started out working and raising a family, I was on a single income with a mortgage and a stay-at-home mum and my first child on $45,000 a year.
Mm.
So I've lived it, I get it, right? It's not a flippant comment. When you look at $250,000 now, it's that's not a large income, right? You're looking at $120,000. Well, when I graduated uni, my starting wage was $23,000, and the starting wage now is close to around that $80,000 for the accounting profession. So someone who's on 120 grand, you're still going backwards. It's the going backwards bit, Becca Jane. It doesn't matter what income you earn, it's the going backwards that shits me to my back teeth.
No, no, no. Well, that's what I was also saying is that even the you think that the 250,000 are doing great, but they're the ones that are getting really kind of kicked in the pants there
Yeah,
compared to
and,
the
and, and
homeowner.
and that household could be, a mum and dad
Yeah.
working or just two people in the
Yeah.
household earning 120 grand each. but the household earns 250 plus.
Mm.
So, this is the reality.
Yes.
The green's the promise, the other two colors are the reality. And it's not stacking up, Becca Jane.
No. Well, what other good news have you got for us?
Oh, let's keep rolling.
Yeah, let's keep going.
This now looks at wage inflation, wage growth versus CPI. So, moving this silly thing yet again, when we sit down and we look, I'm looking, this is wage, this is CPI. So it's been good that your wages is above your CPI, right? That's really good. But look at this inflection point here. Around here was when all of those electricity rebates came off. All through here is when we started to have the Strait of Hormuz happening, right? So what you're going down now and looking at, you're now hitting negative wage growth. That's not good.
So, Dan, if I'm looking at when I look at this screen, I have no idea what this is actually talking about. Like I just see dots and lines. So can you actually like talk to a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old and just really kind of make it clear what this means? Because I just don't understand.
Yeah, Becca Jane, no worries. Again, this is a nerd out screen. So this tells the last 2 years. When you look at the blue line, that's wages, and when you look at the red line, that's inflation. When the red line is above the blue line, you're going backwards, right? And we discussed that last slide where my costs are here, but my income's here, so I'm going backwards. So what this is telling us is wages grew 3.3 in the year to March 2026. Prices grew 4.6%. So you're negative 1.3%. That gap, while it's not enormous, the accumulation of it starting to apply is going to be significant. Okay. Now, there's a timing issue that everyone has to look at to see what's happening. This biggest second tranche of tax cuts, the 40% and the 250 WATO, it doesn't land till July 2027. So as of now, we're still 14 months away from that arriving. The RBA is forecasting inflation returns to the 2 to 3% band by mid 2027. The only way that happens is if the government either stops spending or they raise interest rates. Government stops spending, it's going to impact the economy. And if the interest rates rise, it's going to impact the economy because people have less money to spend. So our maximum pain now is in 2026. The maximum relief we're going to get from this budget arrives in late 2027. So during that time, we're actually carrying that gap, Becca Jane. Okay. This
Mm.
isn't a political judgment. It's just timing. The government can't make time move faster, but it's worth everyone understanding that the next 12 months are going to be harder than the next 24 months. So when we started to talk about our capital allocation a little bit earlier and the need versus want pull, this is going to be really, really, really important because if you don't have your capital allocation correctly, you're going to go backwards. And if you go backwards, that usually means one of two things. One, your debt levels increase because you need to fund the surplus from somewhere. So whether that's credit cards, personal loans, or home loans. Or two, your savings decrease because you're now hitting your savings to meet the shortfalls. And that's ultimately what people have been doing over the last 24 months anyway, is eating into their cash buffers. We're not seeing debt levels dramatically increase yet, but we're seeing savings deplete. And that means our costs of living is greater than the income that we're generating, and the shortfall has to be met through savings. And that's what's happening in Australia at the moment. The difference with the government is they're just borrowing money.
Okay. Go on. What's happening next? Where are we going?
Okay. So when we look at the next stage, the timing problem, when pain peaks and when it arrives. So
Mm.
again, I'm doing my best to be very apolitical in this. It's just a timing issue. And if people understand the timings, they can adjust accordingly. So let's have a look at March 26. CPI hits 4.6%, highest since September 23. A couple of nights ago, we had some tax cuts announced. Before the budget came in, the RBA raised rates to 4.35%. Just very well worth knowing that 4.35% was our peak interest rates when inflation was at 7.8%. So you can see that interest rates are going to increase past 4.35%. 1 July, we get the a tax bracket reduction from 16% to 15% rate cut, and you get the $1,000 deduction that we discussed about earlier. Mid 26, inflation's forecast to peak at 4.8%. So that means my costs are continuing to increase. Our fuel excise is going to expire, so full fuel price returns. If we do not see a reduction in fuel price of at least 30 cents between now and then, our fuel price is going to go up by 30 cents on the dollar. July 27, the tranche 2 kicks in. We get another rate cut and the WATO arrives. Mid 27, they project inflation returns to target band if the oil price falls. And if it doesn't, well, we're screwed. July 27 kicks in for negative gearing. Quarantine begins for our established homes. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. The trust minimum tax commences in 28-29. I think that's an abhorrent thing that they've done. I do have a family trust myself, like most small business owners. And since a lot of small business owners tend to think their business is their superannuation, they don't tend to put away superannuation because they want to have their business to sell. And they usually do things by trust to assist with things along those lines. So to put a tax on that's just going to further increase the burden. He's saying that the NDIS savings is going to begin. We haven't seen that since it was brought in the Gillard government timeframe. The costs have just increased, so that's going to be interesting. And by 34-35, the budget's projected to reach balance. And what that means is the revenue that the government brings in is going to equal the expenditure. We are not going to repay down any debt. We're just not going to get further into debt. So all that's going to happen is what expenditure goes out meets the income that comes in.
Mm.
The only real cuts they're trying to do is in the NDIS, and that hasn't happened yet. So that's a bit of a wishful thinking. And the only real way that we're going to do this is to increase taxes, and that's what they've done.
Yeah, and I guess and I don't know, this isn't something to talk about now, but I wonder what the Olympics is going to do to our budget and
Yeah,
to all
Becca
of
Jane,
it.
can
I
I
mean,
can I
like,
talk about that when we talk about our housing policy, which is the next
no,
slide?
go.
Is that all right?
No, like that, I just put it there because I'm like, we're not even talking about the Olympics, and I'm sure that's going to blow out and it's going to cause, and then they're going to go, we're going to need to increase everything because of that. So, tell me about the housing policy. What's going on?
Okay, right. Before I nerd out about that, I'm going to nerd out about what you've just talked about with the Olympics. Okay. So in Queensland, Southeast Queensland, we've got to build stadiums, we've got to build train lines, we've got to build everything to allow this to happen. And this comes down to supply and demand mechanisms. What really saddens me about our education policy is we've dumbed our education down to such an extent that people don't understand the basic fundamentals of things anymore. And because people don't understand that, then the governments can just lie because they realize people don't understand. You don't, if you don't actually know it's a lie, you believe it. So
Mm.
let's talk about pure supply and demand. If you're building a stadium and you're building all the infrastructure that goes around with the Olympics, the demand for builders and tradespeople is going to skyrocket, isn't it?
Yes.
Because they need them, right? So what's going to happen is we already have a tradie deficit in Australia, and that's why when you get someone to come in and they give you a quote and you look at it and your first thought is, are they taking the piss? It's no, 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 because there's a huge demand and limited supply that cause prices to increase. When I talk to my clients in our scheduled meetings, I say I would not want to be building a house in the southeast corner of Queensland for the next 6 to 8 years. And why I say that is government-led projects will pay more than what the private sector does. So if we're going to demand more tradies to build these things, and there's a deficit in tradies, that means their wages are going to go up. So why would a tradie work with a home builder on $60 an hour when he can go to a big build project and get $80 an hour? What, for him, I'm doing the same job, but I'm 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 almost doubled my wage. So what has to then happen is the builders who are trying to build these houses have to try to meet the wage increase to keep their crew together. So if they have to meet the wage increase, that means their costs go up. Who actually bears that cost, Becca Jane?
Mm.
The person who wants their house built.
Yeah.
So so supply demand economics is going to mean that property prices and new builds are going to dramatically increase. And as we go through this housing policy, I'm going to talk about that.
All right.
Okay, let's have a look at this. It's a side-by-side layout. What the policy intends and what the market actually faces. Okay, so the changes to CGT, the changes to the tax on investment properties. What they're trying to do is they're trying to say, we want to reduce investor competition for established homes. Because as of 1 July next year, if you buy a house and it's established and you have a cash flow deficit on owning that property, you can no longer claim that against your taxable income to reduce the tax you pay. So what they're saying is there's going to be less demand for the established homes. If there's less demand, that means prices shouldn't increase. So that should help affordability. That's what they're going to try to do. They're going to redirect investment towards new builds. So full gearing will be retained in new builds. So what they're trying to do is to draw demand to new buildings. So if I want to be a property investor, I've got to buy a brand new property, and that lasts once because once I sell it, it's no longer that person who buys it will no longer be able to claim the tax deductibility. It's going to slow established home price growth. Less demand will see prices grow at a lower rate, but it's not going to reduce the prices of the properties. Instead of it going up at 6%, it might only go up at 3%, but it's still going to grow. They want to try to give 75,000 additional owner occupiers over 10 years. And CBA did some modeling. They expect that it'll be about a 3% lower house price than otherwise. But what do we face? You're going to lock in effect of the lock-in effect. So when they talk about that is if you own a property before budget night, you keep what you can do now moving forward until you no longer own it. That's called grandfathered. So for those investors, They may go, well, if I get rid of this property and I buy another established home, I'm going to be worse off. So they're going to hold it for longer and they may not sell. The established supply tightens in the short term, so we're going to have fewer listings. And we all know, again, coming back to supply demand economics, less supply of goods, what happens to prices? It goes up. We saw that post-COVID when there was a demand for goods but a lower supply of them because supply chains were broken, prices went up. And prices only started to stabilize a little bit when supply met demand. Now, a new build demand should surge into a sector that's already at capacity. This next one I'm going to talk about, Becca Jane. I want you then to talk about your lived experience. Construction times are plus 40% versus pre-COVID, and the costs are rising between 4 and 6% a year. You've got a new you've purchased a unit in a new development, Becca Jane. When did you go to contract on that?
Oh God. So I think it was like last year, February last year.
No, to go to contract when you said we're going to buy that property, wasn't it
Oh,
about 3 or 4 years ago?
do you know? Oh, so I think they say no, I think we actually bought it, paid and bought, like put the deposit down February last year,
Yep.
um, for settlement to be, it was supposed to be at the end of this year or at the start of next year, but they pushed it out by 4 to 6 months.
Okay. Okay. So what you've just said then is the construction times is plus 40%,
Yeah,
right? So you went under contract to buy this property February last year. The development had started before you went under contract.
correct.
And that development, because reason we know about it when we were down visiting mum and dad over Monday, Tuesday, it's the building right across the road from mum and dad. So we've seen it come, we've actually seen it being built. So construction times are blowing out. And then the next one is a really important thing. There's 20,000 plus development approved units that are currently unviable at current build costs. Because costs are rising too much, for them to be able to build it, it's not economical. So the critical gap we look at is policy reduces demand for established homes. That's awesome. But the supply response, new builds, it's taking 18 months to 36 months longer to develop in a sector that's already capacity constrained. The gap between reduced established supply and new supply arriving is where rent rises. And that is what happened in 1987 when Keating's reforms were revised,
Right,
reversed.
right.
So what Labor's doing, they tried to do 40 years ago. And
But
what
didn't
they're
also
saying is
Shorten
it's
try to
going to be
do it as
different.
well? Didn't Shorten
Well,
try to bring it in? Anyway, I think they're just kind of putting out what you're saying is they're putting out policies and they just keep on trying to
they,
reuse them.
yeah, so Keating tried it. It didn't work. He blamed capital gains tax coming in, but capital gains tax came in a couple of years earlier. Shorten Labor took this to two elections. I think it was 18, 19, and when Shorten was the opposition leader, and the Australian public said no. So the Australian public hasn't said yes this time. They're doing it under the guise of equality between their cohort that's voting for them now against the cohort that won't vote for them.
Mm.
So it's political. But what we're going to see is if we don't have an increase in supply, their $2 billion infrastructure fund is trying to assist with this. But if we don't have an increase in supply and people still need to rent, I've got I've got a high demand for rentals. I've got a low supply for rentals. What happens? Price rises. We've seen that. I've got clients who have got investment properties, and every year their agents come back and say we can put it up $80 a week because that's where the market is. We can put it up $70 a week now because that's where the market is. And this is why. Let's have a look. What I really dislike in this country is when you try to have a debate around policies. The easiest way to stifle debate is calling people racist. Easy, because you just, oh, if you don't want people coming into this country, you're racist. Well, there's some racist elements out there who don't want people coming to this country because they're racist. But for the vast majority of us, we actually don't give two fucks, right? But what happens is when we increase migration coming in at a greater rate, and we don't have housing meeting those people who are coming in, we get a shortfall in housing and rent rises increase. And this slide here tells you what it is. For migration, Australia is a migration country. After World War II, we brought in a significant amount of European immigrants that came over from the devastation of World War II. After the Korean War, after the Vietnam War, we had a lot of Vietnamese come in and settle into Australia. We're a migrant country. But looking at the stock problem, 1.27 million migrants over 3 years into a market completing 170 to 180,000 dwellings per year. That's the issue. That's what unchecked migration is actually doing. So when we look at the bar graph and the chart in front of us, you have dwelling completions in the blue, you have dwellings needed from now. So the dwellings that are needed is in the red. And then you have the cumulative shortfall as the line graph. So you can see as people have come in financial year 22, 23, 24, there's been a great strain on our housing supply. And that's one of the cause of house prices rising and rents rising. Don't have enough houses, have an influx of people coming into the country. What they're doing is they're competing for rental properties. And for the people who are out there renting, one of my clients, their daughters is down in Brisbane studying uni from Mackay. They were thinking that they would be able to get their son to come down to Brisbane, live with their daughter, and rent, and it'd be cost effective for both of them. Unfortunately, they came down to where they were at 40 to 50 people going into looking at a property, and some of them were very, very dodgy to rent in, and the rents were astronomical. And since they were a uni student and her older brother, the real estate agent said to them, look, they're going to struggle to get a dwelling because that's not what our tenants are looking for. So she had to go back into student accommodation, which she was lucky at. But because she got in a little bit too late, her student accommodation costs went up $130 a week.
Oh God.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So this is this is this is the lived reality. And for the people out there, you've lived this, and it's not racist. It's just a live. This is one of the causes to our rental property decrease. It's one of the causes why properties are increasing. It's also one of the causes that hides government government ineptness during 22, 23, and 24, where you bring in more people, they add to economic growth, and that helps your GDP not go negative. And that's what we were looking at without that migration coming in 22, 23, and 24. Let's have a
Right.
look at the property taxes. This is a big one, and I think our first live stream we're going to do next week, Becca Jane, is to actually look at the housing and the tax changes that we've got.
Okay, amazing.
Right? So I'm going to quickly touch on it now. and then we'll do our live stream for people to come in and ask questions. Okay, annual cash flow. Let's have a look at the points. Annual cash flow loss. From 1 July, you cannot deduct to 27. You cannot deduct this against wages and salaries. It is quarantine. So where the loss goes. So let's just call it costs you 10 grand a year. Where does that 10 grand goes now? It goes into a residential property loss pool. It's a separate running account on your tax return that's tracked for that specific property. How you can use it. The loss pool can be offset against A, future net rental income from this or other properties. And I want to clarify that. If you have properties that are cash flow positive and is going to add to your taxable income, and you're looking at it and you go, I don't want to buy a new build, but you know what? I could actually buy an established house. And even though I can't offset that loss against my taxable income from wages, I can actually offset that loss against my cash flow positive properties. And there'll be investors out there that will be exactly like that. Or B, when the cap against the capital gain when you sell. Now, this is really, really important because I've seen on social media saying it adds to it adds to your cost base of your property and you can then take that off your capital gain. It actually doesn't allow you to do that. There's two things that you look at. When you sell a property, you have a cost base and a net sales price, and that's a capital gain. That capital gain then gets added to your taxable income, and you pay tax on your new taxable income. Not on the capital gain, just on the income it adds to your tax. So, for example, if you're on $70,000 and you have a $50,000 net capital gain, your salary is now 120 grand and you pay tax based on that 120 grand. So you'd be up for about another 15 grand in tax as an example. Carried forward losses are an income tax deduction. CGT is capital, carried forward losses are income. They're different parts of tax law. So you can't claim the expense in both systems. So what it actually does is, at sales, your capital gain is calculated, purchase price less sales price, inflation indexed. We'll go further into that on our live stream. Then your accumulated loss pool is deducted from that capital gain. It reduces the taxable gain on your income, not the cost base itself. So it is a big distinction. You do get a benefit for it, but it is not added onto your cost base to actually lower your taxable gain, your capital gain on your property. You're allowed to then offset that income against the capital gain that gets added to your taxable income. People are going to be really confused, and I get it because it's tax law and it's a bit nerdy. We will go through and I'll cover that off better in our first live stream that we do. And I'll have worked examples so people can see what it is. And that's a lot better having the worked examples.
100%.
Yep. So bit nerdy. Sorry, people. Again, nerdy and PowerPoint always goes together. Let's have a look at the honest verdict. So there are three things that are true simultaneously. The tax cut is real, but they are nominal relief. It's not a real recovery. $1,800 on a 75 grand income against a $4,500 to $7,800 in inflation cost increase means households are less behind, they're not ahead. You are getting a tax cut. You are getting relief. But as frame it as the cost of living help is technically accurate, but economically incomplete. And that's this budget. The housing policy is structurally logical, but is timed into a supply crunch. Remember we talked about the Olympics needing to be built,
Yeah.
and we're not going to have enough builders.
Yes. And then we're going to need to bring in immigrants so they can help do it.
Yep. And then we've got to be making sure that they're able to meet the Australian standards. We have some of the strictest building standards in the world. And if they're not building houses to Australian standards, we're going to be in a world of hurt. So we're redirecting investment from existing stock to new builds, which makes economic sense in theory. Everything's great in theory. I was going to try to do a Mike Tyson quote, but it's just left my mind. It'll come back to me and I'll say it at an inappropriate time that'll have no context. Welcome to the ADHD. In practice, the construction sector cannot respond fast enough to prevent a period of tighter established supply and rental pressure. The 10-year projection may prove correct, but if you actually go and you look at what they said they were going to do when they first come to power around housing to what they've done, now they are chronically behind, chronically behind. So, the 10-year projection may prove correct, but based on track record, I wouldn't bank on it. The next 2 years are going to be uncomfortable. It's just going to be uncomfortable, people. The fiscal story is better long term. Fiscal is the budget, but it relies on assumptions that may not hold. A credible path to surplus by 2034-35 is better than no path, 100%. But it depends on just under $38 billion in NDIS savings that have never been achieved ever. It's always increased. Whenever we said, oh, you go back and you have a look at what they said it's going to cost this much and then this much and then this much. It's been astronomically higher than every budget figure that we've had. Every budget figure. So to be able to say in 7 years they're going to save $38 billion in NDIS, not sure that's going to happen. And a decade of bracket creep that any future government may not cut. I'm going to talk about that very quickly. The improvement is real, but it's very fragile. It's it 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 could be built on a house of cards. What bracket creep means is as wages increase with inflation, and if you want your purchasing power to remain the same, if inflation's at 4.6%, well, then you'd want to see wage growth at 4.6% so you don't go backwards. Okay? So as your wages get higher and you don't move your wage brackets up, so at I think it's 46 or $47,000, you move into the 30 cents in the dollar range. As your wages go up, you keep creeping into next brackets because the brackets themselves aren't indexed. So you end up paying more tax out of your salary over this time frame. So honestly, what we're looking at is we're going to tax people more. We're going to stymie people's ability to actually get ahead. We're going to make people more reliant on government. And we're going to continue to spend and hope to God that at some stage we can actually get some savings coming through the budget. But if they do not get that, it's $37.8 billion in savings from the NDIS, we're going to have budget deficits. And that just means Australians are going to go into more and more debt and people are going to have to pay for it. We talked to mum and dad about that, and they look at us and go, "Well, that's not my problem. That's going to be yours." And then I'm going, "Well, it's not really my problem. It's going to be our children's." And you talk about intergenerational theft. That's what they're talking about.
Mm.
Oh my God, how nerdy has that been? They're
Well,
going to
no,
stop sharing.
it has been nerdy. It's been
Oh, no.
information like dense,
Yep.
and I'm like, ugh.
Yep.
But I think the thing is, and what I'd love to just quickly cover, because it's been very long, what I quickly like to cover is You've said the next 2 years are going to be tough. Are going to be a
Mm,
squeeze,
mm.
and you've gone through it. What would you say generally to people in the next few years? It's going to be a squeeze, but do this or check this out. Or I mean, you already said it with your capital allocation. So know your budget, don't spend. Like you've said that, but is there anything else that you could go, this might really help you? Oh, sorry, think about it. I've asked you that question, but we're also on top of that, we're going to be doing 12 weeks of live streams. And so with that, we'll be able to cover some more, like and give you more information and help out there. So we're helping in that way. But back to the question of what can people do in the next 2 years to help them through?
Unfortunately, Becca Jane, you just need to batten down hatches. My youngest boy, Finney, asked me to chat to one of his electrical mates because they wanted to buy a home loan. So the quid pro quo for me going to talk to the young fella and his missus was he had to buy me a beer. And they wanted to buy a home and we were talking. So they're 24. He's an apprentice Sparky. She's currently at uni being a barista for 30 hours a week, right? So we got talking. And, between the two of them after tax, they actually earn 110 grand between the two of them after tax, which is really, really good. Okay. Really, really good coin. We sat down and I said, well, okay, you earn 110 grand. Well, what do you spend? Two ways to do things, increase your income or reduce your spending, right? To get better, you either increase income, reduce spending, and then you can invest for the long term. So we sat down and I said, well, you roughly earn about 110 grand. What's it cost you to live? And they looked at each other and I went, fuck, here it goes. I said, well, okay, you know, this is what it costs for this. This is what it costs for that. This is what it costs for this, roughly, and this. And I said, about 75 grand. Does that seem right? And he goes to me, oh, no, that's probably a bit generous. I don't think it costs that much to live. Because one of my first questions I asked him was when he said, we want to buy a home. And I said, well, how much money you got saved? And he said, we've got 10 grand. And I went, oh, okay. Well, let's have a look at what you earn and what you spend. And then when we said they earn 110 grand and they spend 75 based on Dan's calculations, and then it was no, we don't think we spend that much, which would say at the very least they would have $35,000 surplus. I said, well, you're taking the piss, mate. You got $10,000 saved, yet you got $35,000 surplus. The long end of the story of that is to say, give the same advice that I gave those young kids. Before you want to do anything, understand your capital allocation, understand your strategic direction. What are you trying to do? And then you adjust your life according to that. The next 2 years are going to be hard for a lot of people who are in that 24 to 30 year age bracket, haven't seen this, haven't gone through this before. It's all a brand new experience and it's scary because they don't know what to do. That's why we're having those 12 free live events so that people can come in. We'll tell you what we're going to talk about. We'll also then do one where we'll throw it open to give me
Yeah.
questions. I'm
Yeah.
not going to give you advice, but I can explain how things work, and then you can look at frameworks of, okay, understanding that framework, I now know what I can do. And the biggest thing I got out of these young kids last night was we just don't know what to do.
Mm.
We weren't taught this. We just don't know what to do. So, you know, that's why we especially for that generation, why we invented the financial fix.
Yeah.
You know, that's my passion project.
And
because I'll just quickly, it's a 12-week course designed for 18 to 30-year-olds to give them the fundamentals so they know what lever they can pull. They know what they can do from their budget. Their superannuation is going to be their largest investment. We had one of our participants, Hi Trudy, um, who she was invested in correctly in super, and we made the change, and we just by making that change, we potentially made her $1 million over the next 20 odd years before she retires, right? Otherwise, she would have been poorer because she had done things wrong in her super fund. But once she understood what it was, she could fix it. We talk about shares and investing because kids want to do this, right? They want to go out and they go, well, how can I buy stuff? My boys are blessed because I've done it for them. They don't. Jay understands it. Finney doesn't. He just says, thanks, Dad. Right? We talk about property. So for people who are moving out of home for the first time, okay, we had this conversation with Bella yesterday. You know, you're a beautiful girl. Well, you've got rent and then you've got electricity and you've got water and you've got insurance and you've got internet. You actually have to allow for these things. So through our tools we give the kids, we can say, well, okay, here's your income. This is what it costs you to live. What have you got left? And if you don't have a lot left, you either increase income or decrease expenditure. But it gives them the tools and the confidence and the ability to actually know what lever they need to pull to get the outcome that they want. Because at the moment, they're rudderless.
no, 100%. And I think that actually, as you're talking, I think the catch line and of the logo of our business is Resolute You, know your money, lead your life. And I think at the end of it, if people are just aware of what their money is and where they want to go, that's actually a really good starting point that we could help. And so, as I mentioned throughout, we've got free resources to help people with that. I'll put that down below. We're going to say goodbye and we're going to wrap that up because I think that's a very long, dense thing.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot of information. Um, so thank you very much for doing that. People are going to appreciate. And what I might actually do is even break them up, have one long one, and then break them up into each individual. So people just went, I just want to deep dive in the property, they can do that. Daniel, thank you for your time to do that. That took a lot of effort to actually do all that research. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll also put down here what people can do and how they can get into the live stream, how they'll find out about that. So we hope to see you on Facebook. So we're going to wrap it up. Have you got any parting words?
Thank you, Becca Jane. Remember to like and subscribe, people, to get
Like and
more boring
subscribe.
economic shit.
More slideshows, like and
Come to
subscribe.
us. That's awesome. Thank you, Becca Jane.
No worries. See you soon.
Hooroo.